Welcome, everyone. It's great to be with you in this space today. We are so excited to get started. My name is Kendall. I'm going to be moderating today's session. And I'm so excited for you to meet our speakers. Sarah, who is going to be joining us in just a few minutes, and Renee as well. All right. Little bit about myself. I will quickly introduce myself before we run through some housekeeping items. Um, I'm Kendall. I'm from the Move This World team. I'll tell you a little bit more about Move This World in just a bit. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. So I saw that there were a few people from the Northeast in the chat as well. And my background is in social work. I've been with Move This World for about 4 years, and in that time, have worn a few different hats, ranging from working with partners that are implementing Move This World's program, facilitating our professional development, and also doing some of the behind the scenes work with our program and curriculums development. So that's a little bit about myself. All right, and a brief introduction to Move This World. If there's anyone here that is familiar with Move This World or uses our program, I always like to give our partners a quick shout out. For those of you that are not familiar with us, though, welcome. We're excited for you to hopefully learn a little bit more about the program, and we'll share some information at the end. Move This World is a social emotional learning program. We work with schools, educators, students, families, communities across the country to strengthen social emotional learning. And we really do that in a few different ways, one of which is through our adult experiential professional development. The other is through our student facing curriculum, which supports pre K through 12th grade through bite sized, video based, and audio based interactive experiences that are really designed to give students the chance to get up and move around and authentically connect with themselves and others through these different exercises. Move This World really likes to leverage participatory movement and all sorts of other forms of creative expression as the vehicle, so to speak, for strengthening social emotional learning. So you'll see that that shows up in the work that we do together. And we are going to kick it off with a centering exercise before we get started. So you'll have the chance to practice an example of one of our exercises. All right, so a little bit about our speakers. I'm going to kick it over to Renee to introduce herself, and then I can share a little bit about Sarah's background in case she does not join us in time for a quick intro. So I'll kick it over to you, Renee.
All right. Thank you, Kendall. Hi, everybody. I am excited to be here this afternoon. Renee Colley. I am currently a principal of an elementary school in Traverse City, Michigan. If anybody knows the region well, we are a little school on Old Mission Peninsula. I have a co-principal that I work with, and it's wonderful to have a partner to be principal of a school with. I grew up in Michigan, actually this area of Traverse City. And when I was a teenager, I swore I was going to go away and never return. And here I am back in Traverse City. I do love the area. Found out that it is actually a very nice place to live, a beautiful region. I have always been interested in education. And I first went into teaching. And I was an elementary school teacher for 13 years before coming into the position of being a principal. A principal is something that I never wanted to be, but here I am, and I've learned a lot through it. And I'll tell you a little bit later about the desire for fulfilling this open role at the school. And because it closely relates to what we are talking about, the neuroscience and SEL, sort of my passion, which is overused word, I know, but it is. And so that has helped to guide my path to where I am today and how I'm able to help kids in my school setting.
All right, so Sarah, I know the audience would love to learn a little bit about you, so I'll kick it over to you to introduce yourself. Thank you,
Awesome.
Renee.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Madura. I'm really, really excited to be here with Kendall and Renee at rock stars, and I'm so honored to be here. I am my role currently. I'm an engagement and behavior specialist for an intermediate school district in Traverse City, and so my job is really to kind of go around to a lot of the different schools around the area and work with those tier 3 behavior needs, working with the adults, working with the kids, and really trying to make them successful. I have been in the mental health education space for about 8 years now. I started off working on a psychiatric unit, an adolescent psychiatric unit in a children's hospital. I was a teacher there, really helped with that bridging between the hospital and school and advocating for the mental health needs and those therapeutic supports for kids in school. I, during that time, was really, really lucky to get my certification in applied educational neuroscience, which you'll be hearing a lot about today. And then I moved up to Traverse City and I taught at a center-based program for students with emotional impairments. I was a middle school teacher there for a couple of years. And then this year, I started in this position in the same district. So really excited to be here. I love the brain. I love mental health. I love SEL, love all of it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both. We're so excited to have you here for this discussion. I am thrilled that the audience is getting this opportunity to learn from both of you today. So as far as our agenda goes, in a moment, we'll do a quick opening exercise just to center us before we dive into our discussion. And then Sarah is going to walk us through some of the neuroscience behind social emotional learning. Renee is going to help paint the picture of what this looks like in practice. So my hope is that everyone here will leave here feeling like they have a deeper understanding of that connection between social emotional learning and the neuroscience behind it, and then also what this looks like in practice. So let's check in. We are going to do a quick poll. So I will get that started. First, we want to learn who is in the audience today. What is your current role in education? Looks like we have quite a variety. We have lots of teachers. And then we have some counselors or social workers, a couple of school administrators, a couple of district administrators, and then in the chat, I'm seeing OT, higher ed, professional development, learning designer, online English teacher, early childhood consultant, SEL program researcher, not-for-profit, ed tech, pre-K, librarian. Lots of different roles. Wonderful. All right, well, great. So I will share that with the audience in case you'd like to take a look at who else is here. And we will close that poll because we have another question for the group, which is, what does SEL look like at your school or district? So we'll run that poll as well. So what does SEL look like at your school or district? Does your community implement a formal SEL program or curriculum? Do you implement one in social emotional learning in some capacity? Or, and I'm seeing in the chat, I'm just learning about it today. That is also an option. So it looks like the majority of this group is from a community that implements or practices social emotional learning in some capacity, with some implementing a more formal program. Then some folks that do not have any sort of structure or practice in place. It's a little bit of a variety. We'll share that with the audience just so you can take a look as well. All right, so we're going to close that poll. And for the sake of time, we will move on to our opening exercise. And I'm going to invite everyone for this because we're going to practice what we call a shake-off, which is when we shake off any unwanted feelings, emotions, stressors, anything that we wish to let go of. I'm going to invite us all to take a moment just to breathe. So you can either close your eyes or turn your gaze towards the ground, depending on what you're more comfortable with. We're just going to start by taking one collective breath in together and out. As you continue to breathe, which you can do so at your own pace, I invite you to take notice of how you feel today. How are you feeling in this moment? On this Tuesday afternoon, this busy season, the month of April. And I invite you to call to mind a distraction or maybe even a stressor that you might be carrying into this space today. Once you've identified that, you can look up and open your eyes back up. All right, so the way that this is going to work is we're all going to be counting down together as a group with our right arm, our left arm, and then we are going to tighten our shoulders and release them. And we're going to start by counting down from 5. So it would go something like this: 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, and so on. And Sarah and Renee, you are both going to be counting with me. So we are all counting down together out loud. I know that we cannot hear the audience that is here today, but I trust that you will also be counting down out loud. And as you are doing so, and as you are shaking off, I invite you to imagine that that one distraction or stressor that came to mind for you, we're just shaking that off as we count down together. All right, are we ready? All right. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 4, 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. 2, 1. 2, 1. 2, 1. 2, 1. 1, 1, 1, 1. We'll take a deep breath in and release. All right. So how did that feel, everyone? You can post in the chat how that shake off felt.
I needed it.
I will say I also needed it. I feel my vagus nerves. I'm coming back into parasympathetic, so I am good.
There we go. I'm seeing great, lovely, quick and releasing.
Taylor
Felt like
Swift.
Taylor Swift. I like that one too.
Less tension,
A little
relaxing.
confusing, but good, which means you had to focus. That's
Mhm.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully that helped everyone in this group wake up their minds and their bodies. Wonderful. If you're still sharing that reaction, that feeling, feel free to continue to do so. Otherwise, we are going to learn a little bit more about what was going on in our brains and our bodies, and how all of that works. So I'm going to kick it over to Sarah, who is going to teach us a little bit more about our brains today. So Sarah, I'll kick it over to
awesome.
you.
Thank you so much. I am really excited to be here. And before we start, I want to say that in no way, shape, or form am I claiming to be a neuroscientist, a neuropsychologist. My goal and what I'm really passionate about is taking the neuroscience knowledge that is really making its way to the human services industries, and making it accessible and applicable for what we do every day. And so, my background with the Applied Educational Neuroscience certification, a lot of this work is going to be through the lens of Dr. Lori Desautel, out of Butler University, who I got my certification from. And she really does that same thing, taking these really large neuroscientific concepts. A lot of work. I saw somebody put Dan Siegel. This is part of Dan Siegel's work, and I'll be actually have his book right here that will be talking some about his work, some Dr. Bruce Perry, Donna Nakazawa Jackson. We'll be talking about a lot of those researchers, but how it applies to our setting and to the SEL curriculum. So again, I can't see you, but I'm going to trust that we are going to maybe do some of this with me. So I'm going to make it a little bit interactive. This is the work of Dan Siegel. What he did was kind of take the brain. It has a million parts that are really important, but he really synthesized it to 3 main sections of the brain and made a hand model with it. So I'm going to ask you guys to put up a fist like this. And this is the hand model of the brain. If you open your hand like this with your thumb in the middle, this is showing right up here. This is our prefrontal cortex. Can you type in the chat if anybody knows what the prefrontal cortex is in charge of? Thinking brain, planning, awesome, thinking. Yes, our prefrontal cortex, that's right up here. That is our cognitive functions, decision making, the problem solving, our executive functioning skills. This is where we want students to be when they're in school. This is when we're at our best selves, we're in our thinking brain, we're able to make those decisions, we're able to organize our space, to organize our thoughts, all of the things that you need to be a student and a functioning adult. Impulse control, yes, definitely. The next question is, does anybody know what age our prefrontal cortex is actually fully developed? There's a range of ages, 25. Man, you guys are neuroscientists in here. So the research is showing us that our prefrontal cortex are not fully formed until about 25 to 28 years old, which means, are any of our students coming into our schools with fully formed prefrontal cortexes? No. So they already are lacking the skills biologically through their brain to access some of those things that feel like common sense to us as adults. And sometimes even adults feel like that as well. And if you have teenagers, this is a really good time to recognize that they do not have the fully formed prefrontal cortex skills, and teenagers are going through the second most vulnerable time of brain development, which means they're accessing that part less, and they are literally losing half their minds because they're pruning away a bunch of neural connections. So just to, it's not you, it's the brain and it's biology. So that's the prefrontal cortex. That's the part that we are trying to strengthen a lot of the times in schools with our top-down protocols, which we'll be talking about later. So then the next part is right in here, and it's that middle piece. Our brain is formed from the inside out and the back to the front. So this would be kind of that internal middle piece, and it's the limbic system. Is anybody familiar with what the limbic system is in charge of? Emotions. Awesome. Regulation. Perfect. Yes, this is our feeling center and our emotional center. It does a lot more than just that, but again, we're breaking it down into pretty simple chunks here. The empathy, this is where that can live, and the fight, flight, or freeze. So this little guy, our little thumb here, is going to represent our amygdala, which we will talk about in just a second. So we have our, from the top to the bottom, we have our thinking, our feelings, and then right down here in the brain stem, anybody know what the brain stem is in charge of? Oh, we have less guesses. Survival. Great. Awesome. Autonomic functions, the basic things to keep us alive. Things that we don't have to think about for our body to do, such as breathing, heart rate, digestion, all of the things that we need to survive. Oh, our brain is formed from back to front. This is prioritized the most. Our brain is wired for survival first and connection second, which lines up with survival first, connection second, thinking and reasoning third. So as we move on, we're going to think about, actually, I'm going to talk about the amygdala really quick before I go to the types of stress. Sorry. So our amygdala is in charge of our fight, flight, or freeze. That is kind of like our alarm system, our fire alarm in our brains. So to the reptile brain, perfect. What are some things that we are scared of in the chat? Mine would be spiders. Whoever is vulnerable enough to share what they are scared of. Ooh, the dark, snakes, rats, deep water, sides. Okay, great. These are really very, very, very common ones. Bad grades, that's a good one too. Okay, so as keep going if you are putting it in there, but just go ahead and close your eyes for a second and imagine, really, truly try to envision and visualize. You are on the top of a 45-foot skyscraper, and there are no railings on any of the sides, and you're trying to find a way down. And so you look to your right and you see a million snakes coming at you. And you look to the left and you see a million spiders coming at you. And all in front of you is just pitch black, totally dark. And then you turn behind you and you see bats and bad grades and a loss of control and maybe your technology not working in a webinar you're supposed to be giving. And all of that is right there. How are you feeling right now? How is your body feeling right now? What's happening inside of your body? Anxious, tight, suffocated, stressed, hijacked, panic, heart racing, stressed, panic, shivering, problem solving. Good for you. High anxiety. Awesome. 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 So was there a real threat in that moment? Were you actually on a skyscraper? Were you actually in these things? But could you actually kind of simulate those feelings? Could you actually imagine or maybe even really sense how it's feeling? Your instincts are kicking in. Exactly. You are feeling and sensing what it would be like to be in that danger. That was your amygdala going off. So our amygdala is our fire alarm of our brain. That is here to sense any perceived danger. But notice how I said perceived. It doesn't mean that there's actually real danger or not, which we will get into with some of our kids. So thinking about the types of stress in relation to that amygdala hijack, when the amygdala goes off, it actually kind of hijacks our brain and sends a lot of that energy back to the life-saving portions of our brain. That is the brainstem, which is why your heart started racing. Your breathing might have gotten faster. You might have felt nauseous because that digestive system. The energy is flowing back here because in that moment, you're having a life or death situation, or so your brain thinks. This can be either resilience building or it can be resilience diminishing, depending on the type of stress and the longevity of that stress, which moves us into the different types of stress. In the chat, can you just say yes or no if you are familiar with the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences? Okay, see a lot of yeses. I do see some no's. Today, I am not going into the ACEs. If you're a little bit familiar, I very, very much recommend looking into that. There are some really great videos out there, and there's a really great TED Talk by Nadine Burke-Harris, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, and it is a really foundational piece of where a lot of this research is. So it is the adverse childhood experiences. And we'll be sure to be able to type that out and send out after the presentation. That relates to the 3 types of stress. The ACEs study itself, again, really foundational, but what we're finding is that the 10 questions themselves are not actually representative of the types of traumas that might be happening. And so we're really moving to what toxic stress is feeling like. 3 types of stress. We have positive, we have tolerable, and we have toxic. And this is where we think about trauma. This is where we think about kids that are experiencing things that will build their ability to get through things, which is resilience, and things that actually kind of diminish that. So positive stressful situations are things that elevate the cortisol levels and do set off that amygdala and make you function back here, but it's brief, it's not life-threatening, and you can get through it. It's with support. Again, it's brief, such as my experience today, personally, I will say, trying to get on to the webinar, it not working, having to rush home, all of the things. This increased my heart rate, increased the cortisol levels, made me really super hyper focused for a minute, and kind of shut off my thinking brain for a bit. But I was able to get through it. It's not life or death. And that is going to build resilience for me when I experience that same type of feeling in the future. My brain will automatically say, hey, I got through this. It's okay. I'm able to get through it. On the other hand, we have toxic stress, which is those traumatic situations that it's chronic, it's unpredictable, and we don't know if we're going to get through it. That's where the ACEs are, but it expands even further. So all of the adverse childhood experiences from that study, which is abuse, neglect, household dysfunction, if you're experiencing any of those as a child, especially ages 0 to 18, when the brain is the most vulnerable time of development, then those are toxic stress. Your brain never knows when it needs to shut or turn on the amygdala or shut it off. It is dripping cortisol at all times. It's kind of like a leaky faucet. It's ready at all times to flip its lid and put ourselves in survival mode. That is damaging. And we have now the neuroscience is showing us after the past couple of decades, it is showing us that in those neuro studies of the brain and those brain imaging scans, it actually kills neural connections. And neural connections are what we learn. They are how we experience the world. Neurons that fire together, wire together. It is how we are moving through the world. So toxic stress and adversity kills that resilience. And that is our ability to get through things. Now, tolerable stress is where we can come in as educators. These can be things that are, they could kind of move either way. They're not positive stressful situations. They could be like a car accident, a natural disaster, hospitalizations. But if they are buffered by supportive and regulating relationships, predictable relationships, it actually moves it into resiliency building versus toxic. So I want us to remember that and keep that in mind as kind of our guiding light moving forward. And this is what all of those stressful situations represent in our nervous system. If you take nothing else from today, I do really want you to take this slide and the information from this slide. This is the polyvagal theory, which is a huge part of where the neuroscience research is going, and in thinking about combating the toxic stress and the adversity that our children are experiencing and our students. And this is where we can go as adults in recognizing our nervous system functioning. It looks very complicated, but I promise that when you break it down, it's not. It's basically showing us that we actually have 2 bilateral highways moving in our body, from our gut to our brain, from our brain to our gut, making everything move throughout and connecting everything. And those are our vagus nerves. So we have our dorsal vagal and our ventral vagal. So and they ventral vagal is in front and the dorsal vagal is in back. And depending on which vagus nerve is activated depends on the state of your nervous system and brain. So what happens when we experience a threat, our amygdala goes off. And it's very normal to be activated, to get into that sympathetic nervous system. That's, again, that positive stress. So you can see this little squiggly line down here. That is a natural, normal developing person, adult, student that is experiencing a lot of times they're socially engaged, they're in their ventral vagal state, their digestion is working great, they are joyful, they are curious, they are open. Think of the students that just love to learn and they're so warm, they're so open, or adults, they are functioning in that social engagement stage. And sometimes they get activated and they'll go into, anxiety or anger and that sympathetic, their blood pressure might increase. The things that we were experiencing in that simulation, you could feel your heart start racing, you could feel your digestion, you start to get nauseous. That is the amygdala activating, moving towards the brainstem, and signaling to that vagus nerve, I got to go to the sympathetic. I have to activate because I have to fight this threat. Now, if we are experiencing a level of toxic stress and we are experiencing that activation over and over and over again, your body is going to go into survival mode and it's going to shut down. So it's going to enter that freeze state and go into that dorsal vagal. That is going to look like depression. It's going to look like shutdown. It's going to look like the students that say, I don't care, putting their head down. Having my favorite phrase somebody taught me is the hoodie cave, being in the hoodie cave. That's going to look like students that are just checked out. And their body is, again, in that survival mode. And over here on the right, you when you get this, this PDF of this, you can see on the right, everything that's happening in our body up here mirrors what's happening in the ventral vagal, but it's the totally different highway in your body. But it's going to slow down the blood pressure. It's going to slow down the heart rate because it's not healthy to continue staying in that sympathetic nervous system. You can't be activated for that long. Your body's going to go into that shutdown. Oh, what do we do about that? We need to recognize that this is happening with our students and our adults. And we need to recognize that this is where the achievement gap lies a lot of the times. If we are having two students next to us, we are teaching the same exact thing, and we have one student that is experiencing no toxic stress. They're only experiencing that positive and tolerable stress. They are experiencing healthy attachment. They're experiencing all the things that the science is telling us that we need to for development. They are going to spend their time in this typical development stage, right over here to the left. That means that they're going to enter a space, and at first they're going to scan the environment. They're going to make sure that they're safe. Think about entering a new room, entering a cafeteria for the first time, or a PD for the first time where you don't know anybody. You are going to kind of scan the room to see signals of safety. Maybe you find somebody you know and you feel that heart rate decrease. Maybe you find a spot in the corner and you can see everybody, and so you get settled in. We're going to scan the environment for that survival, but then we're going to go into that regulation. And if we've practiced our regulation skills, and by practice, I mean experienced it alongside with somebody, of those regulation skills, such as breathing. In the car ride here, I called my fiance to help me breathe with him, co-regulation. When we experience that together, that also hits the social emotional, then we can engage social emotionally. I can be open to you. I can want to know how your day is because I'm not stuck in survival. And then we can get to that cognitive part, and you're going to spend the most time in that cognitive part. Now, if we're on the other side and we have a kid experiencing so much toxic stress, they're spending so much time in survival mode. They're spending this much time in the cognitive, this much time in their prefrontal cortex. And if we don't recognize that difference, we're not going to get the same outcome from the students. So what do we do about that? And I am looking at our time, so we're going to kind of speed through this a little bit and know that all of this from here until like the next couple of slides, all of this is the work of Dr. Lori Desautois, and she has tons of information, and I have her stuff linked because this is how we apply the neuroscience to the SEL and the connection. So the application of the neuroscience really can be synthesized into 4 main areas, and this is what Dr. Lori does. The attachment, getting healthy attachment, recognizing and understanding and teaching neuroanatomy, including the nervous system, our educator brain and nervous state, and then that co-regulation. So what this looks like for SEL is the attachment, first of all. Our science is showing so much of those early, especially those first 2 years, if we don't have healthy attachment, and that means not just caring for the basic needs, not just feeding and giving housing, it means healthy, regulating, co-regulating, rocking, left eye to left eye connection. And that if we don't have that in the first couple of years of life, we need to experience that before experiencing anything else. Dr. Bruce Perry has a neurosequential model of development that shows that you need attachment first before you can access anything else. So we might have kids coming to us that miss those first 2 years of healthy attachment in their life, and we are trying to teach them all of these things that we expect them to develop, but until they have healthy attachment down here, they cannot access this. And the cool thing about SEL and all of these things, they are not going to harm any kid. So you don't actually have to know if they had healthy attachment or not. You just have to know that this stuff is healthy for everybody, and you can never have too much dosing of it. So SEL is really those tier 1 supports, what we're giving. The attachment, those healthy relationships. 2x10 strategy is a really great strategy. 2 minutes a day, 10 days in a row, talk to a student, your hardest student, about anything other than school. The first couple of days are going to be like pulling teeth. By day 5, you won't be able to get rid of them. That is an example of healthy attachment. Sharing those personal stories with SEL. This is creating the dopamine. This is creating that the amygdala to feel safe. And it's creating a story in this child's mind that people can be safe. You are creating that story through that. The next part is that neuroanatomy. This is going to be kind of that top-down instruction. We want to both do bottom-up and top-down strategies to get the whole brain integrated. If we are just talking about SEL and SEL skills, that is a top-down only. We have to integrate a bottom-up as well in order to have them experience some of those things. So AEN, Applied Educational Neuroscience, shows us that the neuroanatomy, it needs to be explicitly taught, and that's going to happen through really solid SEL programs. You're going to have the brain integrated. You're going to have how it's impacting your breathing, why breathing is important, all of those things to be able to understand that. We also have to understand it ourselves. This piece is my favorite piece. I think it's the most important. I mean, all of them are really important, but I think that this is the one that we tend to focus on the least, because as educators, we want to just like give everybody everything and not take care of ourselves. This is really critical for us. And I am going to make sure to get a few quotes from this book that really support this science behind it in our after email. But this is modeling the SEL in action. Experiences are what mold the brain. And so being able to give kids our experiences of that regulation and our own nervous system state, and also showing them that I get escalated sometimes, and this is how I move through it. And this is what's important to me. Those personal stories, making it relevant to them, is so critical. And then finally, that co-regulation when we're doing it together. That is both for the adult and the kid, this is how self-regulation is developed. These are through things when we did in the beginning with what Kendall experienced with us, actually hit all 4 of these pillars. One, the co-regulation. We were doing it together. So I could pick up on, Kendall's face. I could pick up on Renee's face, and that can calm me. We're doing it together. It's a sense of community. Having the attachment and connection with the why behind it and the people and the relationships, caring for our brain state so that we could be able to deliver the information, and understanding and practicing the neuroanatomy prior. So that was a lot of really quick information. And I'm sorry, Renee, that I'm leaving you not that much time. Here are some of the resources, again, that we will provide to you. Dr. Lori Desital, again, is that applied educational neuroscience that really is synthesizing a lot of this neuroscience information for us. And here are some other really, really, really great resources. So Renee, your turn. I'm sorry that it kind of went over.
And just so the group knows, I see a lot of great questions coming into the chat. We probably won't have time to go through them all. So what we will do is answer them, and we'll upload them to the community afterwards so that everyone can take a look. So if you have a question, please send it through that question tool and we'll take a look after. All right, Renee, I'm kicking it over to you.
Thank you. And Sarah, don't be sorry. I'm good with just a little bit of time. Again, I work in Traverse City, Michigan, co-principal of an elementary school. We have preschool to 5th grade. We are a small charter school. We have about 170 students. That doesn't include preschool. Preschool is great because I think that is all about social emotional learning. That is top notch for that age level. And in my belief, it should be for every single grade level. Our school became a charter school 5 years ago now, so it's relatively new, and there have been growing pains, but it helped me to come. It helped me to form where I am today because of it. So what I mean is I started here as a teacher. I came from my neighboring school district, which I have nothing ill to say. It was a large district. I worked with lovely teachers, educators, everything like that. My one drawback was that the class sizes were large. So every school year I would have at least 30 students in my classroom. I know that's not unusual anymore. I know that's very typical. Everybody who's probably in the classroom is shaking their heads. But I taught 4th and 5th grades. I taught a 1st grade. And one thing I started to notice is that we had a lot of behaviors, and I felt like I couldn't keep on top of them. And it made me really sad because we were so driven with academics. And I do remember times where my admin, Noah complained, she was doing what she needed to do, would come in and say, "Why aren't you started with your curriculum? It's the bell rang." And I had a line of students at my desk, and it was because every morning sweet little Camille wanted to tell me what her cat did last night. I could care less about what her cat did last night, but if I listened to what her cat did last night, then that day was going to go a lot smoother with her. And it was same as like one after another. Another would like to tell me about their dreams. Who likes to listen to somebody else's dreams? I don't, but it's okay. Like those are the important pieces. And so I just struggled with, hey, we're really not doing the specific needs for our students. How am I going to help them academically if I'm not giving the resources and the support that it takes to meet them socially where they need to be at to help them grow? And so when this opportunity came to come over to this school, this new charter school, which the foundation was on small class sizes and community based, I jumped on it and have loved it. And then in our first, I would say, year and a half of having the school open, we went through 5 different administrators. And so as you can tell from that, even at this one point, we didn't even have one. The climate from staff alone just kind of went down. It was so frustrating and sad to me because I thought this was a great, unique opportunity to really put students' needs first and foremost. And so a position opened up for principal. One of my teaching partners, she and I, a unique situation. applied for it together. Long story short, here we are. We're in our third year of being co-principals at the school. So that's kind of where we have started with all of it. And I go to say that because in our mission with a lot of schools, I know this isn't new, but we really do focus on social and character growth. We know schools, they are put here because we want to teach our students. We can't teach our students unless we are taking in their social emotional needs. And so we like to put that first and foremost into our building. And we were very wishy-washy with a curriculum or a tool to use for SEL. And starting out when my co-principal and I started almost 3 years ago, we didn't have anything in place and tried, and things just weren't working until we were able to get on board with Move This World. I took this piece that you see in front of you. I will not read this to you, but this is right from Move This World, their curriculum, just because these are the goals of our school, is to have a safe, supportive, and successful building. Those are kind of highlighted, knowing the emotional intelligence of our students. And this will be also, I think, in this presentation. I'm just keeping my eye on time. And so overall, what does Move This World and SEL look like at our school of Old Mission Peninsula School? We love having Move This World, and the reason we have loved it over any other SEL curriculum or tool that we have used is because I have direct access to coaches through Move This World who can call anytime, answer questions, help out. So the coaching, the training for myself, for staff, there's even a parent involvement piece that we want to get more into, has really helped. And I think that because there is that constant communication between us and the leaders of Move This World, there's a buy-in from all, and the students also feel a greater need of it too. I wanted to be sure that we wouldn't just say as a school that we are going to teach SEL, but it is built into our master's schedule. So it is a requirement every day that is just equally as important as math, science, social studies, and language arts. All of our teachers have been trained in it. We are working towards having all of our staff so that we can have a cross-curricular, it shouldn't just be between 9 and 9:25 you teach SEL, but it's all day long. Those strategies, everything that Sarah was talking about, how can we implement that? And of course, it implements anyone's in any school's PBIS that they would have already in place. It meshes really well with we're the Panthers. So we have Panther Paws that students can earn, that acronym that stands for something. And it implements really well with all of that. Since implementing this and having it in high regards, love having a common language throughout our building. Since there are these lovely little emojis, you can see some on the screen right there. Kids are getting really well at identifying their feelings to communicate their needs, which I find to be really, really huge. And I, even this little guy in first grade, it's a struggle every day for him and his teacher and everything. And she just said to me this morning, she's like, I don't know if I'm doing any good. I'm doing what I need to be. I'm doing consistency. I'm giving choices. And I said, stop, because what this child does now is he is able to tell us after a while, whatever the crisis is, and he says, I am feeling, and he will insert a feeling, which is huge. And then we're like, oh, okay, well, let's talk about this. His favorite one to use right now is I am feeling hangry, which I can identify with a lot of the time. So we get that. And then the buy-in I already spoke about from staff and students on the importance of SEL. It's not just a tiny frame in our day. I have many, many examples of how it works throughout the students, what I've heard students saying organically out in the building, even with not in that time frame of learning that. And Kendall, I am being very cognizant of our time, so I can move it on for the wrap up.
Awesome. Thank you, Renee. So I just posted in the chat, if you have to run, if you have a hard stop right at 5 o'clock, we will have this information available, including the recording and the slides within the community. So if you follow that link and that information, it'll take you there. So I did want to, in case anyone is able to stay, I did see some great questions. One of which I was going to kick it over to Sarah to answer. And we'll just take that one question, but then we will answer the others and upload them to the community so that you can read through those other questions later on. So the one question that I saw that I thought, Sarah, you might be able to help answer is, can you explain bottom up? That was something that you
Yeah,
mentioned before.
absolutely. So when we think about either top down or bottom up, what we're talking about is the parts of the brain that we're focusing on. So we go back to that hand model. Bottom up is going to be focusing on regulating the bottom parts of our brain to be able to access the top parts. Whereas in top down, we're going to focus on, target like the language in order to get down and regulate the bottom. You need both. We absolutely need both. So an example of a top-down strategy would be what Renee was just talking about with the emojers. You are teaching the emojers. You're teaching specific instruction. You are naming it to tame it. You're giving language. You're giving the explicit instruction around the skills and the language. That is going to be accessed through the prefrontal cortex. An example of a bottom-up strategy would be what we did at the beginning with that, with the shake-off. We are targeting those areas of the brain that are at the top to get us ready to learn. That is what we did at the beginning. Those kind of focused attention that gets us it. It hits our reticular activating system. So it activates our reticular activating system, which helps to process and synthesize information as well as wake up our brain. As well, it calms our nervous system, the vagus nerve. There's a lot of research and resources about the vagus nerve. One of the resources that I sent for like adults is Anna, the anxiety coach. It's a really good one for thinking about it as adults. But those are examples. What are we targeting? Kind of those sensory, those sensation seeking things. The language of the brainstem is sensation, and the language of the prefrontal cortex is words. And in the middle is that emotion and that attachment. So are we going from the top down or are we going from the bottom up? And you need both in order to integrate that whole brain experience.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. So as I mentioned, we will answer the other questions that were shared in the chat and upload that information to the community. But I so appreciate all that was shared from both of you, Sarah and Renee. And thank you to this group for being a part of this discussion. I've been loving the chat and everything that's been shared in here. All of the stories, the insight, the thoughts. It's been really incredible. So I am going to just close us out with 3 closing breaths. But before we even do that, there are some resources here in case you wanted to scan either of those to learn more about Move This World. And I did also see there was some information shared in the chat that will take you to our website as well. We'll close with those 3 intentional breaths that I mentioned before. So if you are still here and you have a moment, you can close your eyes or turn your gaze towards the ground. And we are going to take this first breath for the people, places, and things that have inspired this group right here. Our wonderful presenters and the wonderful audience to be doing this work together today. So let's take a deep breath in and out. And this second breath is for the time that we have spent together today to support the greater community. So we'll take a deep breath in and out. And this third and final breath is for ourselves. May your days be meaningful and your nights peaceful. Take a deep breath in and out. All right. Well, thank you all so much. I hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday afternoon or Tuesday evening. I appreciate those that were able to stay on, and thank you again to our wonderful presenters who are able to share more information to this community about this really, really important work and all of the incredible work that both of you are doing for your communities. So thank you.
Thanks, Kendall.
Thank you all so much. Thanks for the time.